Peace be upon you. We conducted a survey on schools in Muslim countries. Do they achieve the required education objectives or not? We will review the results, evaluate their significance, then discuss the reasons why education is in its current state. We will also review the international programs and the schools that present themselves as Islamic, then outline the solution for the problems in education. The survey included 30 objectives of education to develop the human being, his beliefs, ideas, soul, feelings, and personality, as well as his ability to critique, analyze, evaluate, achieve happiness, acquire beneficial knowledge, build safeguards against all forms of corruption, and break free from enslavement to anyone but Allah. We will put the 30 objectives in the description for those who are not familiar with them. These objectives are based on the 5 pillars of the Islamic education system discussed last episode, which uses revelation as a reference and aims to develop a human being who fulfills the purpose of his existence and attains happiness in this life and the next. About 21,600 respondents completed the survey. The vast majority were people who attended formal schooling in Muslim countries, not self-educated or homeschooled. Thus, the results apply to this group. In the survey, we asked, in your view, are the 30 listed educational objectives important, useful but not important, or not important? 95% answered that these educational objectives are indeed important. So, we are not evaluating schools based on our personal opinion, but on objectives considered by the majority of respondents as important. We asked, for each of these 30 objectives, please answer if it was fulfilled by the schools you attended. To a large extent, partially but not enough, it was not achieved. Or, on the contrary, it had a negative effect. We calculated the mean for the 30 objectives. On average, only 12% of respondents thought that schools achieved the educational objectives to a large extent. Partially, but not enough. 31% no, it does not achieve it. 46%. Schools have a negative effect on this educational objective. 11%. If we combine, no, schools do not fulfill this objective with negative effect. That's 57% compared to 43% who said, yes, to a large extent, and partially but not enough. For 16 out of the 30 objectives, the negative impact was much higher than achieving objectives. The most achieved educational objective was teaching students about monotheism and protecting them from what subverts it. Yet, those who thought that schools fulfill it, to a large extent, were only 22%, i.e., around a fifth. The least achieved educational objective, according to the respondents, was teaching students the life skills needed for their roles in life. How do I prepare for marriage? How do I choose a spouse? How and why should I raise children? How can I be a good parent? Only 5.25% thought that schools achieve this. To a great extent, i.e. 1 in 20, and more than double believed that schools had a negative impact on this educational objective. In light of these figures, we shouldn't be surprised about the sorry state of marriage, families, and family stability. Many respondents expressed their shock as they were filling out the survey. They felt sorry for themselves and worried about their children. Therefore, school education, according to our survey respondents, minimally contributes to the development of faith, ideas, soul, emotions, and personality, objectives that the respondents considered to be important, and may even have a negative impact on these educational objectives. Question: what brought education in Muslim countries to this state? In the episode, Schools, Educating or Molding, we reviewed the history of the global school system, which was originally formed for the control and indoctrination of societies, to enshrine ideas and values dictated by those in power, and produce workers qualified to achieve the goals of materialism, not to develop free humans liberated from slavery to others, harmonious in heart, mind, spirit, and emotions, working for the purpose they were created for, and achieving happiness in this life and the next, per the Islamic education concept. The 30 educational objectives are based on the concept of education in Islam. Thus, we do not expect them to be fulfilled through this school education system, internationally or in Muslim countries. The philosophy of education in Muslim countries mirrors the global philosophy, indoctrination, and production of workers qualified to work in a materialistic environment. So, A person is like a product on an assembly line. Primary school, high school, university, certificate, job market, work, salary, care for the body and the worldly life, disregard for the soul and the hereafter. They only know the worldly affairs of this life, but are totally oblivious to the hereafter. Quran translated meaning 30:7. So, it's not surprising that this system fails to develop the human being. In Muslim countries and globally, one symptom of this global failure is the misery of women, discussed in the episode Liberation of Western Women, which is being reproduced in Muslim countries. In Muslim countries, the distinctive features of the Islamic education system, its 5 pillars, were demolished. Education is no longer for servitude, nor is it a shared responsibility. Instead, the occupation and its subject nations have complete control over the curricula. Revelation is no longer the reference, nor is wealth distributed fairly in society. Education outcomes aren't measured by achieving Quranic objectives, but by grades and qualifications set according to materialist standards. Furthermore, the issue of education in Muslim countries is compounded and more complicated than in the West because there are other corruption factors. 1. Unqualified people in charge. Administrative, supervisory, and developmental committees, based on opportunism and allegiance instead of qualifications and capability. 2. A zeal to subjugate generations to those in power, instead of truly educating them. 3. Inadequacy of teacher training and the financial insecurity of teachers. 4. Routine modification of curricula to isolate generations from their history, culture, and role models, drain their intellectual and civilizational heritage, and erase their identity. According to the studies of Western strategic planning institutions, like RAND Corporation, and the videos published now and then, of discussions among Western politicians about changes that are needed in school curricula in the Muslim world, the Western school education system, despite its flaws, instills in students an attachment to their history and pride in their role models, which is not reproduced in Muslim countries. Instead, most Muslim history has been erased and students are taught a few historic milestones, normal saline, as discussed in the episode Just a Nanny. Thus, the illusion of learning is achieved and students and parents believe that they are learning the history of Islam and Muslims. Once elements of strength are destroyed and elements of corruption spread, there's no longer any need for detailed plans of destruction, micromanagement of details, or erasure of all Islamic features from education. Because, with the above in place, the desired Islamic education has no chance. It is important to note, dear viewers, that this corruption started leaking into the education systems of the Muslim world before any direct military invasion. Without this corruption, we would have been resistant to occupation in the first place. If you are patient and mindful of Allah, their schemes will not harm you in the least. QTM 3:120. Hence, the solution starts with us, by understanding our reality. Not to complain or blame others, but to fix it. The most dangerous aspect of today's education is that revelation is no longer its reference. You may wonder, how can revelation be a reference for education? In the Islamic Golden Age, pious Muslim scholars, with their uncorrupted innate natures and minds, deduced that revelation was the absolute truth. Their knowledge system was clear and harmonious. The unaltered Quran and Sunnah are testimonial ilm, knowledge, consistent with natural and social sciences, without any contradiction. Indeed, the sources of knowledge, including the mind, are only credible if an infinitely perfect creator is acknowledged. As detailed in The Journey of Certainty, scholars get closer to Allah by studying and contributing to natural sciences. They worship Allah by reading His visible signs in the universe and life, and by reading His written signs in the Quran. They employ ilm for the benefit of mankind and seek refuge in Allah from useless ilm. More importantly, they piously avoid the use of ilm to harm people. When in doubt, they pray to their Lord, who created the universe and established its laws. He grants them more ilm, as He says, what can be translated as, but no one can grasp any of His knowledge, except what He wills to reveal. Quran 2:255. Thus, the scholar's spirit, mind, belief, and ilm are all harmoniously aligned. He does not fabricate ILM for personal gain or adapt it to fit anyone's agenda, because he views ILM as a trust and responsibility. So, revelation is a motivator for ILM, is in harmony with ILM, validates its tools, e.g. mind, prohibits the falsification of ILM, decrees it for the benefit of mankind, and prohibits its use for harm. When we became weak and replicated the Western education system, we also replicated the conflict between church and science. The church obstructed the progress of civilization by its unwelcome interference in the sciences without a preserved revelation as reference. So, the West segregated religion lessons from science to stop the church's intrusion. This segregation was mirrored in formal education in Muslim countries. The reference of revelation was cancelled and revelation became confined to a school class, Islamic education, and a major in university, Sharia. Revelation was no longer the reference and motivating spirit. For natural and social sciences, students are taught in religion class that interest is forbidden and revokes blessings. Then, in another class, that it's a foundation of the economy. They study in religion class about the bond of faith and the reference of Sharia, while another class teaches allegiance along artificial border lines, created by colonizers, according to imported laws, not subject to Sharia. They study what prepares them to specialize in medicine, pharmacy, engineering, accounting, and law. But they aren't taught, in schools or universities, the fiqh, jurisprudence, of these professions or their Sharia principles. They may even be unaware that any specific fiqh and principles exist, or that mindfulness of Allah is needed in all professions. This produces a discordant personality that views religion as one of several academic classes to be studied in order to pass, not a life system or absolute truths. It produces a character who can't reconcile revelation with experimental science, but finds them contradictory. A character that can't reconcile between the seen and the unseen, applies standards which violate revelation to judge between right and wrong, and fails to see that this contradicts their Islamic faith. You tell them, this is forbidden. They reply, they have the right to do it as long as it does not harm you. Moreover, in the late 19th century, during the occupation, Christian missionary work thrived in the Muslim world. The earliest schools in Muslim countries were missionary schools. Many Muslim children who studied there later occupied high positions. They did not become Christians, but they became disengaged from their Islamic identity. As a reaction to the spread of these missionary schools, their influence, and the deficiency of formal schools, the concept of Islamic schools emerged. Were these schools formed to re-establish education based on the aforementioned pillars? Education in the name of Allah, stemming from the reference of revelation as an absolute truth that rules over ILM, to develop an integrated person working towards the ultimate goal and achieve the educational objectives we mentioned? Don't assume that these schools had the required competencies and the clear vision to achieve this given the weak state of the Ummah. Their modest goal was to protect the children's Islamic identity. So, these schools added Quran recitation classes, gave Quran memorization prizes, carried out activities to endear religion to children, and employed teachers to instill Islamic values in children within the available resources. All these are important positive actions, but they do not make education truly Islamic, nor do they provide the pillars required to develop a Muslim. This is important to know, so that the sincere staff in these schools can form clear goals, and so that parents know that their parental duty hasn't been fulfilled by placing their children in schools that present themselves as Islamic. With the passage of time, the concept of Islamic schools has also become a capitalist commodity. In some cases, investors are tempted to invest in this popular and sought-after commodity. The lowest paid teachers are hired regardless of whether they truly represent Islamic values and regardless of their ability to instill them in generations. Teachers' salaries are insufficient, so they cannot focus on their mission to educate children. A female teacher may remove the Islamic dress imposed by her school as soon as she reaches the car park. These schools compete with others using the standard success criteria. They rarely boast about their graduates fulfilling the Islamic education pillars, but instead boast about the high grades their graduates achieve to qualify them for university, diploma, job market, work, and salary. Yet, the usual additions remain in order to earn the title of Islamic, like the Quran recitation class, Umrah trip, etc. Undoubtedly, the responsibility is shared. The total absence of a thought process connected with revelation isn't only a problem in schools, but also in society and families. They all play a part in forming the child's identity, but, for accuracy and objectivity, schools that claim to uphold Islamic values are generally more effective in achieving the educational pillars that form the student's Islamic identity, as per the results of the survey. This is mostly dependent on the presence of a teacher with a message who can touch students' hearts. However, the state of these schools is far below expectations. Globally, the concept of international education programs emerged, such as the British IG and the American IB and SAT. Despite the differences between them, they are better than national curricula schools in Muslim countries in terms of developing the ability to correlate, analyze, and apply, building certain aspects of character, and staying up to date on scientific developments. This was also clear in the survey results. Despite some differences, these programs were formed within the globalization framework, which aims to establish a common language of interaction between people of different cultures and religions, to support open economies and shared work in capitalism and materialism. Some of these programs also prepare students for social life and raise the banner of international peace through education. These educational programs set frameworks to achieve specific educational outcomes and design exams to measure them. Publishing houses study the required outcomes and goals and produce books on how to achieve them. These educational programs and the curricula designed to fulfill them avoid a direct clash with religion, which might restrict their market and impact their profitability. Avoiding a direct clash sounds good, but what really happens? These programs bypass all religions, true and false. They contain no religious references. If they do mention religion, it's only in reference to the culture and society. Muslims didn't design their own curricula using revelation as a reference. Bypassing religion led to gaps in ILM, values, and morals. Secular curricula filled these gaps with scientific interpretations of life and humanist values that everyone must agree on. How did organisms emerge? A question that requires an answer. Don't talk to me about a creator, as creation is unseen. Don't impose your beliefs on me, and I won't impose mine on you. We respect each other's beliefs, but this is not science. So let's agree on a scientific explanation. Thus, everything unseen was placed in one basket, even though some unseens are truly baseless, while others are validated by mind, innate nature, and science. The presence of the Creator is a prime example, as detailed in The Journey of Certainty. However, these curricula limited ILM to science. Thus, the unseen was excluded from the circle of ILM in its comprehensive sense, and materialistic explanations were imposed on aspects outside the scope of materialism, such as the origin of the universe and life. The theory of evolution was taught as the ILM that explains the origin of organisms, even though its well-known claim that organisms emerged by chance is also an unseen. A stupid unseen that contradicts mind, innate nature, and science. As explained in The Journey of Certainty, the gap in morals and values created by excluding religions was filled with the morals of globalization, sourced from humans, not revelation. Thus, the student is taught principles of acceptance, respect for human rights, love of freedom, equality, and social justice to become a global citizen. Attractive slogans. But the other, who asks to be accepted, may be homosexual or a Satan worshiper. Who defines human rights? If not the preserved revelation from the Creator of mankind, then human rights and social justice are subject to change, and conflict may include what Allah forbids, and may eventually lead to violating the rights of others. If freedom and equality are not bound by truth and justice from a preserved revelation, they will end up contradicting truth, justice, freedom, and equality, as explained in the episode Liberation of the Western Woman, and as seen in many incidents such as the prosecution of the clerk who refused to issue a marriage license for two men because it contradicted her religion. She was prosecuted for disrespecting the homosexuals' freedom and equality. So, as a result, the freedom of one comes at the expense of the other, with no clear criteria to distinguish truth from falsehood in the absence of revelation. This is not taught to students in international programs. Instead, the values of freedom and equality are stressed and presented as the standard and reference for judgment. It does not occur to them to evaluate these values and standards according to a different reference, especially when they are mixed with other values that are indeed beneficial, such as care for the environment, refugees, and the poor. But students are not taught to achieve servitude in its comprehensive sense, which encompasses all benefits, nor are they taught to uphold truth and deny falsehood, or work for the hereafter, as these values are derived from the reference of revelation. The result is an entirely new system to replace religions, including Islam. In reality, this system is more like a new religion, the religion of scientism and humanism, the religion of be a good person in its fluid sense. Allah says what can be translated as, the creation and the command belong to Him alone. QTM 754. Just as He is the Creator, He, glory to Him, is the one who commands, condemns, allows, forbids, and sets for man the correct standard to evaluate things. In contrast, in scientism and humanism, creation is explained without a creator. Values and morals are set by humans independent of revelation. What is religion's role then? It has no role in the student's view. If taught at all, it appears to be imposed and rammed in for no reason. So, religion was not directly attacked, nor was the unseen blatantly denied, but it was confined, marginalized, and left to shrivel and die in students' souls. If students learned anything about their religion after receiving a distorted epistemic foundation and acquiring moral values detached from revelation, they would judge their religion, sharia, history, and values according to the wrong standards. For example, students are taught to be inquisitive. Excellent. Questions are encouraged in Islam, which is against blind imitation. But when Muslim students inquire about issues concerning their religion, like the existence of a creator, prophecies, heaven, and hell, they will view such things as non-scientific, as they are evaluating them based on materialistic values, which limit ilm to science. Thus, they start doubting their religion. Students learn that non-believers go to hell, even though some of these non-believers, in their view, are good people, according to humanist values. So they doubt the justice of Islam. Students study in English, and the examples, content, and applications are from the history, culture, and civilization of other nations. The heroes and role models also belong to other nations. These curricula do not mention Muslim role models or Muslims' contribution to science. Thus, students take on the identity of other nations whose culture they've been immersed in and whose language they speak. They're disconnected from their language, which limits their understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, as well as their history and heritage. They are detached from their identity and lose the sense of belonging to the Ummah and its history. They're uninvolved in its advancement and glory and feel uncomfortable living in it. They believe that neither they nor their ancestors made any contribution to the materialist achievements they see around them, and their hearts are attached to the countries whose curricula they studied. To increase the students' attachment to materialist explanations, humanist standards, the English language, and cultures of other nations, they are packaged in a relatively strong educational content that supports thinking, analysis, application, and innovation in many aspects, as well as strong teaching methods that encourage students to debate and elevates their self-esteem. These elements are generally absent in most other schools. Thus, parents enroll their children in these programs because they are keen for them to be well educated in these aspects, to learn English, to increase their prospects in international universities, to join the elite, or to escape the national curricula and its many issues. Many of these parents, those with remnants of Islamic identity, bring their children after they become atheists or deviants, seeking help. This is according to colleagues in the fields of psychiatry and counseling. It is no secret that the final outcome of education through these programs is largely influenced by teachers and the school's policy. Many teachers in Muslim countries are non-Muslims or even atheists. Does this affect everyone educated through the international programs? Of course not. There are students whom Allah has protected from intellectual and ideological deviations, either through good parenting or other sources of ILM and inputs. You might say, well, shouldn't we have benefited from the true scientific content, the teaching and presentation methods in such programs, to develop our own curricula based on revelation as a reference? Indeed, but unfortunately this did not happen on a wide scale. Some schools that present themselves as Islamic are based on international education systems. Here we ask again, do these schools place the international program in an Islamic framework? Are teachers able to identify areas of weakness and address them correctly? Are they aware of how the philosophy, principles, and goals of the curricula differ from our religion? Are they financially secure? Do they have the necessary training to achieve all of the above? For example, when a teacher comes across the theory of evolution and says to his students, this contradicts our religion as we are Muslims and believe that Allah Almighty created Adam, would this satisfy the students? Or would they see a contradiction between science and religion? The issues with the theory of knowledge and the distinction between real science and pseudoscience are addressed in the Journey of Certainty. Some teachers in international programs found our series useful in teaching their students, by Allah's grace. But what about the vast majority of others? Should the matter be left to the individual teacher's education and effort, instead of a school-wide policy adopted by the Islamic school? A number of students who become atheists or develop doubts are taught the theory of knowledge in international curricula in a way that limits ILM to science and excludes the unseen, that is deduced by mind, innate nature, and science, while it includes unseens that contradicts all that. If teachers are well aware of the Islamic theory of knowledge and present it to students clearly and logically, it will provide the foundation required to benefit from all ILM that students are taught. Later on, we have a compounded educational crisis: the absence of curricula suitable for the Muslim Ummah, based on the reference of revelation and a comprehensive theory of knowledge, the lack of qualified teachers to deliver the curricula, and the lack of sponsors for such projects at the country and school levels. What are the proposed solutions for the problem of education? We must realize, dear viewers, that we cannot solve these problems in isolation from the Ummah's political, economic, and social issues, or while we remain follower nations. We must also realize that abandoning the school system without a well-defined alternative may do more harm than good. We must be careful not to get so carried away in our zeal to protect our children that we leave them with an unfilled gap, as this may lead to a setback. However, there is a lot that we can do which we should not neglect. First, spreading awareness. We must be collectively aware of the seriousness of this issue and recover from the illusion that our children are being educated. We should focus on the 30 learning objectives listed, or other equally worthwhile objectives. We don't claim that ours are perfect. We're just planting a seed that is subject to criticism and development. We must spread awareness about this education crisis, the statistics, the educational objectives, and the 5 pillars of Islamic education which we must demand at every level. Before enrolling our children, we must ask the school, do you believe in the importance of these objectives and pillars? If yes, what programs and methods do you have in place to achieve them? Show us your programs, methods, and previous achievements. Much of the terminology in these objectives is absent from our dictionaries, memories, and consciousness, and we must revive it. Second, prioritize. We should prioritize the achievement of these objectives in our children using all means possible. Turn to your soul and cultivate its morality. 'Tis the soul that distinguishes humanity. O you who believe, protect yourselves and your families from a fire. QTM 66:6. The educational objectives we discussed not only improve our children's faith, but their lives too. It brings forth their filial piety, makes them a blessing for us, and a path for us and them to paradise, Allah willing. Optimize these objectives in your child's life and relegate schools to their proper place. We must stop making our children feel that their entire existence is about exams, grades, and certificates, and we must give priority to reading, extracurricular courses, and activities that fulfill the educational objectives, which we must embody. to become real-life examples for them. Third, closing the gaps. We live in a time of expanded communication. Education is no longer confined within school walls. We should therefore design programs based on Islamic principles to achieve the aforementioned objectives and connect those who deliver them, who share our concern and vision, with our children who receive them. This will make it easier for Muslim families living in Western countries who complain bitterly, "We are losing our children to schools." Efforts already expended in this area must be coordinated and enriched through the exchange of experience. Fourth, revive the concept of educator and mentor. Parents in the Islamic Golden Age would employ mentors to teach their children and develop their characters. They weren't only required to teach the Quran, but also serve as role models through their conduct. They embody the pillars that they teach, accompany the child on various activities, and guide the child, male or female, to the correct conduct. This does not relieve the parents of responsibility, but provides support. Children usually respond to a stranger more than they do to familiar parents. The objectives we mentioned may serve as a contract between you and mentors. Ask them, "How will you plant these values and concepts in my child? Which books and series will you use? Which courses, lectures, and activities?" Do not expect the mentors to fulfill this mission on a volunteer basis. We mustn't be miserly if it concerns our children's humanity, just as you pay generously for your children's English lessons and for other private lessons to excel in high school. You should be willing to pay to improve their life, spirit, soul, and afterlife. Whatever you save on such expenditures you will later spend on psychotherapy, reckless pursuits, or addictions to harmful indulgences which fill the void in their life, not to mention losing them and their religion. Are there young men and women qualified to be mentors? Yes, especially in the last stage of school and early university. But with the meager salaries offered, they soon enter the workforce in search for their livelihood. Fifth, the right mix. To our beloved university students who care about their ummah, please master your specializations. At the same time, seek religious ilm from useful courses, such as Sinat al-Muhar, which provides a Muslim with the intellectual faith-based foundation upon which to build useful knowledge. The Ummah is in desperate need of people with the harmonious combination of mastering natural, social, and Sharia ilm, so that they become role models who inspire honor in our children, and the building blocks for beneficial education, Allah willing. Sixth, dear investors in education, you are dealing with the most important investment, the investment in a human. You may hire teachers with the lowest possible salaries, then spend the profits on building mosques, raising minarets and domes, and decorating them. But who are you building them for? The generations who have abandoned their religion. It's a higher priority to invest in qualifying teachers who are immersed in revelation as well as the Islamic theory of knowledge, so that they become the source for everything our sons and daughters learn, and in securing these teachers financially with good salaries, so they can focus on their mission. This also needs a long-term plan to recruit intelligent, pious youth from the early stages of studying, before specializing, to acquire ilm through this vision. Don't expect the tremendous global efforts to be defeated by a few Islamic activities and projects, however beneficial. Seventh, despite all that we discussed, we do not deny that there are teachers in normal and international programs who uphold their Islamic identity and are protective of their religion. We remind them of their great mission at the crucial battlefront. They are guarding. May Allah help them and support them. Finally, let's all remember that Allah did not put our fate in the hands of others, but in His hand alone, as He says, what can be translated as, "So be mindful of Allah to the best of your ability." Quran 64:16. An important mindfulness is that of our children's education. And whosoever is mindful of Allah, He will make a way out for them. QTM 65:2. This was a necessary introduction to the topic of women's university education, to be discussed later, Allah willing. Peace be upon you all.